Okay, so this is the ONWAFarmers podcast, way of communicating with our members and anybody else who's interested. I've got Trevor Whittington here with me, the CEO of ONWAFarmers, and I'm Mick Fels, the Vice President of ONWAFarmers, and this is a new initiative really about just making more use of this great information that's all stuck inside your head, Trevor.
No, I don't know. This is our second one in a week, so I think we obviously haven't run out of topics. So,
well, I didn't drain you completely dry last time then.
No, it's been another week, and since then I've drafted another article, and a whole bunch of issues have popped up as they do.
Yeah.
I just did a media interview for the Farm Weekly on the refinery that the Prime Minister's announced.
Yeah, I heard you on the Country Hour, actually. It was a good line. Like, you obviously citing the many issues around, and perhaps the politics around building this refinery in Western Australia, but and you got onto biodiesel as well. And I concurred with what you were saying, but I thought that might get some friction amongst our membership and others, basically arguing the case for why mandated biodiesel may not necessarily be 100% good.
That's right. Mandate biodiesel. Europe's got it. America's got it. Your soybean farmer in the US, or your sugarcane farmer in Brazil, you make great money because you've got a additional market there. It's a compulsory market. Only problem is, guess who's also paying for it?
That's right, yeah. When fuel's one of our biggest expenses.
That's right. So that's the big negative. And then there's also other issues around the fact that some of your machinery manufacturers don't quite like some of the biodiesels.
No.
And there's two sorts of biodiesels. There's biodiesel and there's renewable diesel.
I think there's a limit to how much, and as a ratio, they can put through these modern engines, isn't there?
There's 5 or 10% for biodiesel. But the world switched to manufacturing renewable diesels. It's been around for about 20 or 30 years.
Explain to me the difference between renewable diesel and biodiesel.
This is my deep knowledge of chemical engineering. You're an engineer. How much chemistry?
My wife, Marnie, is the chemical engineer.
Okay, right.
She wrote her thesis on the supercritical extraction of, the extraction of peanut oil using supercritical carbon dioxide. So she probably would be quite well qualified downstairs, but she's not here, unfortunately.
You're stuck with cogs and gears and
things that move that I can poke my fingers in.
Right. So we all know about biodiesel, which is you basically it's like doing home brew. It's relatively simple.
Right.
You can do it in the backyard with a couple of $1,000s worth of kit.
Is it necessarily canola or oil seeds?
And animal fats.
Right.
Container carbon's the way you go. Mm-hmm. It's simple. It's hard to do it on a huge refinery. It's not efficient. So 30 years ago, mid-90s, someone came up with a new way of using hydrogen and a whole bunch of temperature and stuff. And it's like a synthetic diesel, and that's called renewable diesel, and you can build your big $500 million plant, and it's vastly more efficient.
So they're doing a lot more processing of the actual fats to create
right.
that.
And the end result is, instead of just adding 5% or 10% or whatever it is of your biodiesel,
you can run an engine
to a existing fossil fuels diesel.
Right.
You can use 100% of this stuff.
It's interchangeable with diesel and petroleum diesel.
And that's the big and the your John Deeres and your Cases and Toyotas are all happy for you to use it.
Yeah.
So obviously the synthetic form is very similar. There's the old BP refinery. There was a plan to build one there, and that was announced 4 or 5 years ago, and that's in abeyance. There's a plan by Cargill's and another mob down at Kwinana to do a crushing plant. There's a plan at Albany to do a crushing plant for canola. All of them are on hold because without a mandated use of biodiesel, which during the height of the carbon climate change madness, everyone was expecting, and they looked on the map, where's lots of canola growing, WA, where you go.
Yeah.
And if you do the numbers though, it's you can take a ton of canola, what do we do, about 2.5 million tonnes of canola, and it turns it into around, with this renewable diesel, around 500 litres of the diesel. So if we planted, just the quick numbers I did for the Country Hour, if we planted all of our 8 or 9 million hectares that we put into crop across everything into canola,
which of course rotationally isn't possible.
That's right.
Aside from
we would have
else.
Enough diesel in Western Australia to run all of Western Australia, mining industry,
the whole state,
that's
everything.
it.
Which is, that's
that'd
quite
be nice.
nice.
Give us guarantee us that you'd probably need more than $1,000 a tonne. You'd probably need 1,500 if you're going to continuous and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But that'd be nice.
Yeah.
You have to factor in you will pay more for your trucks and the CBH and the supply chain, getting your fertiliser in and all the rest of it, which is the problem with the mandate.
Yeah.
And so, but all those projects are on hold. Prime Minister came out this week and announced a $4 million feasibility for at Karratha.
Yeah.
The journos didn't read the press release. I read the press release.
Right.
And they thought we're going to get a new refinery.
Right, for $4 million. That'd be good value, wouldn't it?
No worries. It's more likely, we're talking billions and billions.
Yeah, of course. And, and we've been decommissioning refineries.
Well, we had 6. BP was one of the first in Australia, built in the 50s. And that in WA got shut down 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. Have they decommissioned or is it all mothballs?
Got the tanks. But look, they're old, relatively small.
Yeah.
Big new modern ones in the Middle East, Malaysia, Singapore's huge. China, Japan, whatever.
Yeah.
So we've just imported it, and it's been. Our labour's expensive. Everything's expensive.
Everything's expensive.
And then the power. And the crude comes in from the Middle East or some parts of Asia, and we were processing it. We've now down to 2 refineries, one in Gladstone and one in Melbourne, and both of them were running at a loss. They're now running at super profits at the moment. But so the government put in a 2 cents a litre under the Morrison government subsidy.
I see.
So to build a new one, the reality is they probably need a subsidy.
Yeah.
We would all end up paying for that.
But I mean, this government, I think their modus operandi now is we've got to make everything Australian, and of course we're going to subsidise it. So that seems to be how they think.
The horror, what are we going to go back to? Holding cars and Chamberlain tractors? So where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
If they were serious about fuel security, the first thing you do is, they've lifted the 30 days. We've had 30 days of onshore fuel in reserves. We should have had 90.
Yeah.
Now they've lifted it to 50, aiming to get to 50.
Right, so I think it's 42, I think I heard recently.
At the moment, but they're aiming to get to 50. Well, 50 is not enough.
No.
We need the global minimum is 90.
Yeah.
Japan has 365.
Yeah.
They're an island. We're an island.
Yeah.
We've been shutting down and running out of our crude that was coming out of Bass Strait or out of the Cooper Basin.
Yeah.
We have banned fracking at the state level. 90% of WA, Victoria's all banned fracking. You need fracking for crude and gas exploration.
Forgive my ignorance, but is fracking actually part of every form of oil exploration, is it?
I don't know.
I thought they used to just drill a hole and there was the oil and out it came.
Yeah, well, certainly it is for gas.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask the oil and gas guys, but they're often looking for both at the same time.
Yeah.
And if you say you can't frack, why would you bother looking for oil? Yeah. Australia's not super prospective for oil. The most prospective part of Australia is the great Australian Bight.
But haven't they done a bit of exploration out there and found that it's either too hard or too deep?
They've found a bit.
Yeah.
But they've banned most of it.
Yeah.
And there's now 30% of Australia's offshore waters are in marine parks. Why would you come here?
Yeah.
The environmental approvals go through it. So if you're worried about fuel security, you'd make sure you're drilling it for enough.
Yes.
No point building a refinery.
And I've heard that commentated a lot from the experts in the industry. You can't refine if you don't have the crude. And I picked that up in your comments on the radio during the week. The big problem with the Hormuz Strait is that it's the bottleneck of crude coming through it. I don't know how much refined fuel comes out of there, but I know a lot of the world's crude comes through there. Yep. So all that, we've been sort of scavenging or begging for diesel, from our Asian neighbours because we're underprepared and they were well prepared. I'm sure we're paying handsomely for it. But the problem is those refineries haven't been replenished while the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked. That's the speculation I heard was that harvest, for instance, on farms is going to be a problem this year. Even though we've got diesel coming in now, we could hit a wall because those refineries weren't being replenished with crude. So having our own refinery here, as I understand it wouldn't have solved any of these problems anyway because we still don't have access to the crude.
And the refinery's running just in time. So unless you've got some big salt caverns underneath you, like you have of Texas, and you blow them out and fill them up full of crude, you have a year's worth of crude.
Yeah.
And the only place you can do that is probably inland from Glasgow. Not Glasgow. Yeah. Glaston.
Yeah, I can see what telly you've been watching recently. How could you not watch
So you need somewhere to park a vast amount of crude, which you probably should have, because we keep some crude. The Morrison government bought a couple of million barrels.
The US crude in Texas, didn't we?
We left it over there.
Yeah.
Just to tick a box.
Yeah.
And when it was cheap at $30 a barrel.
Right.
So
Happy
we
days.
just got it wrong. And then the Liberal, the coalition failed miserably in this.
Yeah.
We're still failing miserably. The feds have announced a $4 million pre-feasibility. It's not just to do it for Pertham, it's actually look anywhere in WA. The chance of them building when the unions are going on strike up in the north.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And if it did, it's years away. The fallback is to mandate biofuels, but the Californians and the Europeans are the best example. You're paying between sort of 50 cents and $1 more a litre.
For the pure biodiesel you're talking about?
For this renewable diesel, the canola stuff.
Yeah, so, the renewable diesel.
Yeah, which you can use 100% on.
And that's the stuff that they reckon they can use in aeroplanes too, is it? The aviation, renewable aviation fuel?
Problem with aviation fuel, the Kero, is once you go for a biodiesel, renewable diesel, you got to get the moisture out when you're up high. Planes don't like sucking in moisture. You can do it.
I don't like them sucking in moisture either when I'm in them.
No, that's right. It's incredibly expensive. Everyone keeps pointing to it. That's great. I don't care if the price of, aeroplane fuel goes up. No country's been a first mover because you have to mandate that anyone who flies here goes out with fuel tanks. There's a reason why no one's been going down the biofuels, whether it's for planes or diesel, because the community backlash is going to be unreal.
When it costs, twice as much to fly to Bali, do you mean?
That's right, it's just that, but there's the flow on for the rest of the economy.
Yeah.
And the governments have the community's lost interest. You look at the polling has fallen off for the whole climate change stuff. The cost of living.
Yeah, suddenly people are more worried about buying food or houses, crazily enough.
Well, I'll go and get an electric ute, but the problem is the price of diesel, of electricity has gone up exponentially and will continue to go up.
Yeah.
So,
one of the issues with that, because we just got ourselves a hybrid car actually, not because it was hybrid, but it was the model that we wanted and it was hybrid and it goes like a rocket, so that's great. Nobody will tell you, like they say, you plug it in and charge it at home, and we do, and that's great. But we had to do our own maths. Marnie's an engineer, I'm an engineer. We worked it out. That it was about half the cost of the fuel that it was taking to run our old Land Rover, which was actually very efficient. It was a diesel. So it's not free. You plug it in there, it's not free, and it's not free of emissions, because somewhere that's still being generated with fossil fuels. That's the truth of the matter at the moment.
And the biggest cost is your depreciation on your new vehicle, particularly on hybrids, because everyone's the technology.
Nobody wants the second hand one.
No one wants a second hand. Here's an interesting one for you. The best thing is having solar and a battery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you're on the farm. I'm my place. The boys up there on the farm. They're slowly winding up the Western Power network and replacing with the standalone systems.
Which have got their own issues.
Got their own issues. They're getting better, but about $300,000 they're spending on them. It'd be nice if you didn't have to pay the same tariffs, but if you could get them to put in a $300,000 solar and battery thing and say, your problem now, you're off the system or we're not maintaining it, then you'd be able to power up your ute.
What's actually happening, a lot of people I'm aware of, are not getting the $300,000 one provided by Western Power and then paying the regular fee for their electricity. They're buying their own renewable package with a generator and everything for about $100,000, as I understand it, a third of what the government's paying for the same thing. Not worrying about all those heritage environmental clearances that Horizon Power goes through. Like, as I understand it, people are having to give them basically a caveat around that,
got a lease on it.
100 square metres or whatever where this thing is.
And then they're rolling in and out, topping up the diesel and all the rest of it.
And if it breaks down, you've got to wait for them to turn up 2 days later to flick a switch on it. You're not allowed to touch it.
That's right.
So.
Well, here's one for anyone that's likely to go down that path and you hear it's coming. Go and buy yourself a whole bunch of electric bar heaters from the second-hand store.
Right.
Plug them in to the shearing shed all summer. Let them go.
Right.
Rack up your power bill. Make sure you.
Then you'll get a big one.
Yeah, double or triple it. Okay. Because then you'll.
We're not endorsing
any of my ideas. And certainly
Trevor's gone rogue, people.
You want your highest power bill you can, because that becomes your minimum benchmark.
It's like wheat quotas, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Go hard the year before, and you'll be okay. Because if you're going to put on a bunch of dongers and backpackers, or you're going to put in your own biodiesel system, and you need a whole bunch more power, then they're not going to come and upgrade your system.
No.
So it is what you end up with. For the amount of diesel you and I use on the farm compared with the ute versus everything else we're running around with, I don't think that's the issue. I think the real issue is making sure we've got diesel when we need it.
For industry, especially.
For all of us. It's not just for us on farm. Make sure the CBH trucks and
the mining sector.
It keeps going. We just need Australia to have more reserves. And on farm, you can sit there and wait for the government to do it. But you'd be probably wanting to make sure you've got, 6 months and a full seeding, full harvest ready, which means more tanks. But before you go out and buy a cheap tank, what did we learn today about GPA?
Exactly, that Mark Fowler reported back from GPA that now there's a possibility it's being discussed, the idea they're going to classify, with biofuels coming, they're going to classify them as a hazardous good, which is then going to change all the regulations around actually storing the stuff on the farm. So, if we go and spend $100,000 on tanks now, maybe in 2 years' time, we're going to have to get rid of those ones and get the ones that meet the new regulations.
Well, the worst, all our old tanks are out of spec. They're probably out of spec now, but no one's looking too hard.
Yeah.
But it's it's a federal government initiative based around the flashpoints of biofuels. You're probably closer to it than I am. And we could end up, it's not just having a bundled tank. Some of the stuff is like
double wall.
You either have a full foam system, suppression system, or 10 times the amount of water of the volume. So if you've got 10,000 litres, you need 100,000 litres. And it needs regular annual certification testing, on and on and on it goes.
Yeah.
And of course, there'll be a whole bunch of bureaucrats having a wonderful time travelling around Australia, telling people off.
Audits, on-farm audits.
So that's something our peak body's got to push back hard on.
Yeah.
And we need all the other, peak bodies involved in agriculture to muscle up. We need all the farmers who aren't members of peak bodies to be a member, because
so there'll be people listening to this who aren't members of any advocacy group, and they'll be as worried about what you're talking about as the rest of us are. And I don't know if they fully understand that the only thing between us and those sorts of catastrophic things happening is advocacy groups. And advocacy groups don't run on thin air. They need...
Well, you're up here, you're not getting paid, you drive to Perth, you've got a meeting. Mark Fowler's just spent 3 days over in Melbourne.
They're all voluntary positions.
That's right.
Just in case you didn't know that.
So you can, you guys pay a membership and you volunteer your time at the very least. Unless you're comfortable with losing glyphosate and paraquat and putting in new fuel tanks and on it goes.
And a membership, depending on the size of your business, between $1,000 and $3,000, let's call it. Right. That's a lot cheaper than driving to Perth every 2 weeks for meetings. And, a lot of people don't want to do that stuff. And a lot of our members actually say to me, they don't want to go to the meetings. They don't want to get involved in all the weeds of all that. Yeah. But they really like supporting us because they know that
we get it.
People like us are doing that.
Yeah, not everyone's, wants the time, effort. No. It's a grind to get into policy detail.
You've got to be a particular kind of weird like me to actually get to enjoy doing those things.
You write back and critique my latest submissions. And,
Oh, you noticed it,
you obviously wrote that with AI, and I said, Mick, without AI, you wouldn't have got it.
Yeah, it would be 3 words.
That's right.
To be honest, I quite like the 3-word version of Trevor Whittington, but that's okay. So getting back onto the renewables and the biodiesel.
Yeah.
So, it'd have to be $1 a litre, $1.50 a litre, more expensive by your back of the envelope calcs if we were going to switch across wholeheartedly to the biofuels. What if it was a 10% mandate? I mean, and I'm a free marketer, right? I'm a liberal in that classical sense. I like small government. I like non-interventionist government. I believe the price signal is the best way to manage supply and demand. Coming from that position, also, I want to keep an open mind on these things. When you consider that all our heavy industry, a lot of our heavy industry in Australia, as I understand it, certainly the fuel refining industry is subsidised, like $1 billion for the Whyalla steel mill and all these.
The refineries.
All these things, that seems to be the new way because we've priced ourselves out of global competitiveness in Australia. Now suddenly we're looking at self-security, on things like food, energy. If we looked at it from the perspective of taking equivalent subsidies that are going to petroleum refining, to applying that to using biodiesel or renewable diesel, I wonder how the equation would look then, particularly if you had something like a 10 or 15% mandate, because at the end of the day, that still reduces our reliance on petrochemicals by 10 or 15%, and that's still significant.
Well, two things. The refineries, when we got down to 2 refineries, were losing money. They were old and tired.
Yeah.
Cost of maintaining them. And they're relatively inefficient because they're not big like the ones up in Singapore.
Yeah.
So they put in, I think it was 1.8 cents a litre subsidy to keep them going. It's worth about $70 to $100 million a year.
Right.
They don't need them at the moment because they're making pockets of money because they arbitrage the difference. But that's going to swing back. 2 cents a litre is not going to subsidise
$1 or $1.50.
Yeah, that's.
But with this new idea of a refinery, sorry to interrupt, but with the a $4 million pre-feasibility thing, if they were going to get something off the ground, you can guarantee, I think, that there's going to be some pretty big government spend on that. I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, because I don't quite understand why they're looking to do an old school refinery, which is what they're looking at somewhere in Western Australia. They did the announcement in Karratha because Perdaman's up there. They've got a track record of building these things. But it's incredibly expensive to build something there.
Yeah,
that's true. You're basically competing with Singapore or Malaysia or the Middle East. All have got refineries, vastly cheaper labour, cheaper energy and an easier regulatory system. So it just happens to be on the top corner of Western Australia.
Yeah.
And then you've got to pick it up, the fuel, and move it again to the market. So it's a double handling.
Yeah.
It ain't going to happen. So you can build it down in, you can do it down in Kwinana. But really the biggest market's over east. So why wouldn't you build it over there?
Well,
there's 2 refineries
is it bad? I mean, with our mining industry, is that an intended market for this fuel?
Well, it
in
would
the first
be,
place?
but you've got to compete with Singapore.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to do it in the Middle East. We'll do it cheaper.
This is the problem. A good friend of mine who will remain nameless, but we often have conversations about these things. He's a free marketer, I guess, like me, but he's now thinking if we want to have sustainability, home ground capacity in manufacturing, maybe we're going to have to subsidise it.
Well, which is a great thing. During COVID, we had Morrison government saying, we need, we can't make face masks, we can't make everything else that we needed in the medical world, PPE. They're flying stuff in, or Twiggy was helping flying stuff in from China.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, well, so we're going to now move, when we're at nearly full employment, to making face masks and PPE. Or we're going to start making, and then it's going to be electric cars.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be food security. Well, what is food security? I'm always confused about that. If you start food security, it's having fuel and fertiliser security.
Yeah.
But if you make it almost impossible to do business in Australia, because we import the wrong people because we don't have the right skill set. People don't want to live in the regions. Our energy is 6 times more expensive than China. Our IR system, which the Labor government's put in 700 pages. Yeah. Which bit of your manufacturing security, food security, whatever, are you going to do? We import tinned tomatoes because you can't find people to pick tomatoes in Australia. And they can make them.
Some of them are made in Australia. Say they're made in Australia and they're imported. Apparently, if you've been watching Four Corners.
Yeah, it's like, and food security is a bizarre thing because food security in someone, I don't know, in Sudan or Ethiopia or Indonesia, it's a bag of rice. It's a really basic diet. Yeah. Whereas
in Africa, it's
I've heard
corn.
Yours is Wagyu and Chardonnay. And
at times are tough, but
that's right.
They're having to cut back.
Where's the lobster? So, but the reality, it's a bizarre argument. If you're really worried about food security, don't stop bringing people into Australia and pushing up the number of people. Have less people.
Reduce demand.
Very unsophisticated arguments.
This whole idea about, subsidising to support industries and that's all good and well in a crisis when it's like, we don't have enough fuel, we don't have enough fertiliser, we should be manufacturing this stuff here. There's thoughts of global conflict, we need to be manufacturing munitions here. In a perfect world, when all this global strife miraculously settles down and we go and invest $100 billion in, subsidising all these industries that we think it's really important to manufacture things here. And then, the world goes back to what it was 10 years ago. And suddenly the stuff that we're making here is double the price of everything we can import. It can just come in, the fuel's coming back in at $1.30 a litre, and ours is $3.50 a litre because it's full of biodiesel or whatever. Where are all those people then? Where are they? Are they actually going to be happy to keep paying double for all this stuff? This is that whole protectionism versus free market argument that happened in the 70s and 80s in Australia.
Once they're in, you build a whole industry around arguing for it.
And you become a state-controlled economy.
So you'll have the Renewable Industry Association lobbying Canberra to maintain their mandates or subsidies and to hold off the imported. And then and they'll be lining up with the Greens and the in the climate change, crew, and they'll be writing checks to, Labor or Liberals or whatever to, it's called old school rent seeking.
Yeah.
Whereas we could be out there spot buying on the spot market, tanker loads of fuel because we need the fuel to put in our tractors to grow wheat, because you can guarantee the price of wheat's probably still going to be at $350 a tonne in 10 years' time or 2 years' time or whatever. And Indonesia and Vietnam and China and our other key markets, they don't want us to pay for our, the cost of using Australian-made renewable diesel in our headers and tractors and trucks. So, welcome to the real world.
Yeah, and if you want to see what it looks like, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing these things, by the way, because, we've got to do something. We are vulnerable in the globalised world. We're very vulnerable, and we've seen that with what's happened in the Middle East. And heaven forbid if there's, conflict in South Asia, that gets really crazy. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing something, but this is the problem that we face, is doing that is going to be very, very expensive. And can we actually exist? What is the answer to this? I mean, not that I expect you to know that, but
where do you start and stop? We're just in time for parts.
Yeah.
We're just in time for a whole range of things that come in our supply chain. If you're really worried about global security, maybe we shouldn't be sitting there with 6 subs that, 5 of them at most of the time don't work.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have 20 or 30 subs. But the other way of looking at it is, how quickly can you respond? So if you look at Ukraine, they staggered around after Russia came, over the border properly for the second time 4 years ago. And, they quickly ran out of artillery shells. So they're desperately, drumming up artillery shells around the world. Then they worked out drones.
Yeah.
And they built a drone manufacturing industry.
Right. But did they already have a manufacturing industry?
They had actually quite a high-tech sector. They're making a lot of electronics for cars and
so they had that capacity
Europe. They were big on the old USSR for manufacturing in their armaments industry.
Right.
But, they've swapped to making drones.
Yeah.
But the point is, do you try and prepare for everything? So should we be making millions of artillery shells and millions of drones and our own planes?
I think the key is adaptability. I mean, in the Second World War, all our tractor factories started building airplanes and things.
That's right. You can build it.
We had a sector that we could adapt very quickly to doing this
stuff. So that goes back to, you actually need a skill base.
Yeah.
You need 2 things. You need capital, and so you need a heap of money. So running up a lot of debt's probably not real smart.
Yeah.
Because if you need to go out and borrow $1 trillion to actually fight someone off, that's number one. You need a skills base, because funny enough, people don't want to come and work in your country when you're getting, bombed to hell out of you. So, and you need quite a good skills base.
Yeah.
But, our universities are punching out people doing anthropology degrees.
Yeah.
When they probably should be doing, we need more engineers. We
not
need
too
more
many.
That's right. We need more bricklayers. We need bricklayers to build buildings. We need sparkies to wire them up. So you need the appropriate skills base if you're going to bring people in. So, and as a policy wonk and someone engaged in pushing policies through the political system, we need more of that sort of discussion, as we do.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to have a simplistic solution.
Yeah.
But if you've got a sophisticated economy, you've got low debt, you've got a good skills base. You're flexible.
We dream of that. It's not that long ago, but it feels like a dream now.
If you had a flexible IR system, then maybe you don't need such, need to be building your own cars and planes and tanks, because you actually look like a very sophisticated, self-sufficient country that can look after itself. Yeah. But as you get weaker and what's the UK now? 1 in 3 18 to 30-year-olds is on the NDIS.
Right.
With their equivalent.
Yeah, right.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So you've lost.
And we're heading that way here.
We are.
Yeah.
But
now this probably does feed. We were talking about biodiesel, renewable fuels. You've written a column recently about, or a couple of, as I gather, about sustainability. So it's a bit of a hack, that word these days.
Yes.
Do
you know what does it mean? Do you know what it means?
To be able to keep doing the same thing without being diminished, I suppose.
That's one way of looking at it, yeah. as a farmer and someone who's got a business, that could be having a viable business.
Yes, absolutely. So profitability, I've always argued, in my various capacities, that profitability is the first pillar of sustainability, because if you ain't profitable, you're not going to last.
Well, if you read the 2 reports I read this week, and I commented on an article that's going out Farm Weekly next week, 2 reports commissioned by GRDC to link into where are the gaps in the sustainability. So I ground my way through those.
Is why we pay you the big bucks, Trevor.
Oh, yeah, they were hard grinds. The first report came up with 31 ways to, build on existing sustainability frameworks. Now, there is a lot of different frameworks out there. There's a grains industry. NFF's doing Australian ag sustainability. You've got a renewable sustainability. Wherever you look, the problem I see is that there's no overarching simple one, and then if you had one, what problem are you solving? Because sustainability...
Yeah, that's the question. I'll go back to first principles. Do we need one?
Who's asking for it?
Yeah.
Now, the consultants and the industry elites and people in government say, oh, well, you need your social licence. You need to prove that you're doing it clean and green. Well, my response to them is the market has already stepped in. Your minimum residue testing, CBH, your exporters are, looking at what you're doing. You're putting stock into sale yards. There is minimum standards you're expected to perform to. Yeah. Otherwise, you quickly get culled out. So there is a system in place. If it's in terms of slave labour, well, guess what? There is state and federal legislation.
What is this business about slave labour? Is that Donald Trump taking the mickey there? As if we use slave labour in Australia.
That's an attack on us parents being able to
employ children without paying
use our own kids without paying them.
Is that what it is? Because I'm concerned that is what it is, because that's obviously an important part of farm businesses.
It's
part of growing up on a farm.
Looking for a problem solved.
Yeah.
Sure.
But he's charging another 2.5% tariff on Australian goods.
Yeah, that's right. But that's really a protectionism mechanism. But what's spun out of what was happening in Bangladesh and Pakistan and making Nike shoes has then become a global system.
Yeah.
It's been picked up here.
Is this coming from EU as well? Because I know with the ISCC, which is our accreditation system when we grow canola, if we want to access the European market, there's anti-slave labour sort of stuff that we have to sign. We're not using slave labour in there. Is that?
And it gets picked up and incorporated in every sustainability framework. Then it becomes linked into trade agreements. And so you can say, well, Australia doesn't do that. We shouldn't have to sign off.
Can't our government just sign off and say we've
already got a full regulatory and compliance system around slave labour?
Yeah, and, surely the government could be audited on that rather than every individual bloody business.
That's right. So the failure is, but the problem is, we'll get an organisation like that's come through in these reports. Well, we should be able to prove that right down to the farm level. And of course, that becomes another regulatory burden that gets put on farms, and that's not the only one. It becomes your carbon footprint.
There's a bit of an interesting thing going on here, where control is becoming concentrated towards government, but the work is being devolved back towards the individual.
Yeah. And you don't see a lot of pushback by big corporations because they don't want to be singled out by activist groups.
But they get special treatment anyway in legislation. Of course, like the big banks, the big miners, the big everything, they've got the phone number of the Prime Minister, they chat with them and all that. So their interests are usually pretty well protected. If there's something that's disadvantaged them, then they usually get a carve-out for some reason. It's the small business and the family business.
The Australian market's relatively small, with 28, 29 million people. Yeah. So you only get, the big 4 or 5 banks.
Yeah.
There is only a few major, there's 2 major port stevedore operators.
Yeah.
There is a limited number of Brookfields.
Yeah.
But there is only, if you want to build a new big building of a refinery, there's only 4 or 5 contractors that are big enough to do it, the multiplexes or whatever. So we don't have that critical competition.
Yeah.
So more regulation doesn't tend to worry them that much.
Yeah.
But it certainly gets pushed down onto small business.
Also because a lot of those businesses can pass their cost on.
That's right.
Yeah, so if they get more regulation, more compliance, they just add it onto the ticket.
You're going to build, government decides wants the Olympics in Brisbane.
Yeah.
they don't have much competition where you can go to get people to build the sports stadiums they need.
Yeah.
That's why you don't see the big end of town screaming the house down too much about new IR laws. The mining guys slowly worked it out a bit belatedly under the last round of IR laws. They were slow to come to the table on the heritage laws in the state. We made a lot of noise with PGA, jumped up and down until they got enough courage to step up.
But $1 million or a couple of million on getting an approval for a family business is enough to shut you down. But for a mining company, it's inconsequential. Just do it. Who cares?
Look, another 30 days in the office over a year doing more regulatory stuff when there's no extra dollars coming in. So part of the article from last week's Farm Weekly, this one coming up, is saying for grains particularly, we are mostly an export market. Our buyers are usually food insecure. We're not selling a lot, a bit of canola, it goes to Europe. We're not selling a lot to Europe. It's mostly Indonesia, China, Vietnam, the Egypt, the Saudis. They're food insecure. They're not agonising. Whether we've got a diversity and equity plan on our individual family farms, and if we don't, they're not going to buy the grain. They're looking at it. What's our price of grain versus the Russians?
So you mentioned on the diversity and equity, we're getting into the ESG, environment. What is it? Environment, sustainability, and governance.
Yes.
That was a buzzword, a buzz acronym probably 10 years ago. I think people are starting to move on now. I think Donald Trump's played a part in that. So that, not everything he's done is bad. But
someone needs to tell the GRDC and the National Farmers Federation.
I was going to allude to that. You've written about that. So what's GRDC proposing there?
Well, they're not. They've commissioned 2 reports, and we've yet to see how they respond. But I've done a shot over their barrels, going, there's 31 projects in there. One of them's the Indigenous engagement by the grain industry with local Indigenous groups. I'm going, why? Who in Indonesia or Vietnam or China is saying we're not going to buy your grain, or they're going to pay more for the grain because we've got an Indigenous engagement strategy.
And which of the growers are asking GRDC to do that?
That's right. Yeah. So, but the consultants are out of Sydney or Melbourne.
Yeah.
That's the sort of report they write. And so they're writing what they think the market's... besides the fact it's almost unreadable...
Yeah.
Most of the projects don't have a cost benefit.
No.
They're not critically looking at the market. They're saying the market, in the letter that was to Mark Fowler and to me from Nigel Hart saying, here's 2 reports. It's good that they're consulting with us. Didn't actually ask what our feedback was. They just said, have a look at them. But they're saying...
That's what consulting is.
Well, it's just the new way of finding it. That's right. Yeah. So the problem is they have got too much money in their bank account, $750 million, going to go up again. They're looking for projects.
This is what it looks like when they have money burning a hole in their pocket. They're starting to look for new ways to spend it.
That's right. They go, and it sounds like, the market and the social licence needs to prove that you are a good person, good producer.
I've found, because there was some sustainability stuff being talked about when I was Grains president, and I found, when I reviewed it, the first draft of this sustainability framework, the whole thing was written from the first principle being that we're doing it badly now.
Yes.
That we've got something to apologise for and we need to fix it. It's probably this apologist view of the world these days. So that had been written by people who hold that view, so be it. But, I was very passionate about it. I ruffled a few feathers, actually, because I was quite critical of it. Because I don't see our industry as, we're actually world class in terms of sustainability in whichever form of that word you want to use. And we don't need to be apologising about what we're doing. Doesn't mean we can't improve what we're doing, but all of this stuff is basically coming from an assumption that we're terrible people who are doing bad things, and this is what we need to sharpen up our act.
Yeah, it's worse than that, because what happens is the activist groups, the true believers, have seen this as a pathway to get government regulatory rules to get what they want.
Yeah.
So they might be, Farmers for Climate Action, and they will see a mandated system to prove that we are improving our soil carbon as a great thing because it ticks their box and they like it. So they're fully supportive. Yeah. Another mob would be, a native veg mob who want to protect native veg. Oh, well, we're going to mandate that every farmer has to prove that they are protecting their natural capital. And then on to the next mob who are worried about glyphosate, or they don't like glyphosate, they don't like paraquat. So they want to put in systems that track the chemicals we use and benchmark it against European. It is a backdoor way to
do the groundwork for the future regulation.
And the problem is that the industry says, okay, okay, we'll do that. Or we don't push back, or we don't question why we need them. Suddenly...
And when you say the industry...
Who is the industry? Yeah. Well, if it's GRDC, looks like it's the industry.
Yeah.
They're not voted in by you or me.
No.
So by default, a report's written by a consultant, GRDC adopts it, they sign off on they pick, 30 of the projects, and the projects get done. It builds into a framework. National Farmers Federation has got a whole heap of money to do a sustainability thing.
Yeah. How many of these sustainability frameworks are there?
I listed in a comment there's literally tens of them, across every industry.
In agriculture?
Across, every anything you do.
Yeah.
There'll be, like the trucking industry will have a sustainability framework or a ESG, and they'll have signed it. We're in a policy stuff that their peak body, because they don't want the criticism.
But the interesting thing is that the Australian industry, and this isn't me just being parochial here, we're known around the world, we're clean and green. Every market you go to, they know we're clean and green. That's why they do pay a premium for our product, because that's known about. They know that there's not going to be full of chemicals, it's not going to be full of stones or whatever else it is. And we've done that without having ESG or without having sustainability frameworks. And we're still, parallel with leading the world on the quality of the produce that we grow and the way that we grow it, we've also increased productivity at the highest rate of any sector in Australia. And in fact, if it wasn't for agricultural productivity growth in Australia, we'd be borderline recession now because of what we've done. So we've managed to do that without having all this.
And we're lifting our standards by ourselves. What we don't want.
Exactly. The free market is actually doing that with some just sensible regulation.
We've got to be very careful to open the door, because once you start putting out all this data, saying, this is what's been happening in this paddock, it'll have to go up in the cloud.
It can get cherry picked.
Someone will look at it, and then they'll put in a minimum standard. Yeah. Away you go. And the Europeans are right down this path, and they wish they never were.
Yeah.
But look, if you want, if they say the community, the elites out there say, the community's demanding this.
Yeah. Social licence.
Social licence, whatever that means. Yeah. And then you go, okay, let's look at social licence.
There isn't actually, you can't go to the police station and get a social licence, apparently.
Well, live export ban.
Yeah.
Prime Minister comes out, Minister of Agriculture, saying, the community's demanding that we shut it down. We go,
they watch Four Corners and now
show us it. We've got 40 years of data saying the majority of the community supported it.
Yeah.
We said, so what's the social licence metric you're using, the survey work? You've left live exports for cattle, so what's the difference? What about intensive piggeries and chicken? And you know what? No response.
Yeah.
Because it was a political exercise.
Yeah.
But, you'll get organisations like the RSPCA will go out there and say the community's demanding eggs, free-range eggs.
That's something we need to talk about soon too, is what's happening with bird flu and the poultry industry. That's going to be a big deal.
They're worried. All the free-range is closing their doors no matter on that. But you go into Coles and Woolworths and you look at the shoppers, and sure, there's a percentage will buy RSPCA or free range.
Especially if it's the same price or similar.
But it's not though. The majority of eggs sold are not.
Yeah.
And so I was down at dairy conference yesterday.
Less than 100 dairy farmers left.
Less than 100 dairy farmers
and going
down from 400.
Yeah. Talking about food security and,
Well, now we're putting in powdered milk to fatten up our milk, because otherwise we're trucking it in from eastern states. It's insane.
Isn't it just,
And you go down to Margaret River and the council's saying, we don't want to see spraying, we don't want to see big trucks in our road, which is the sea and tree changes moving into the community saying, we love this sort of...
We love it.
We love this European-American...
And now we want to start changing
That's right. So it's
like the immigration argument, really.
And then you go to Coles and Woolworths down there, they're not buying all organic. In fact, you go anywhere, it's not all organic.
Yeah.
So the community, as much as people say there is huge demand for this, there's community expectations. The shoppers, the community is not voting with their checkbooks around it. they are, on the whole, comfortable with the level of regulation we've got.
Yeah.
We don't
Which is
need,
already world leading.
Well, that's right. We do not need any more. If you
Yeah.
look benchmark with other grain growers, which I did in the article I've written, the Canadians are probably the most woke contemporary of ours, big grain exporters.
Right, yeah.
Their peak farming organisation has pushed back hard.
Good. Good on them.
So but we are careering down this pathway. I worry that GRDC's got too much money. I worry they're not going to look at it critically. My suggestion was they should have get some more consultants in, some economics. I'll write the terms of reference rather than them.
Okay.
Because I'm sure you and I can write, if you want to review and get the outcome, you write the terms of reference. And let's take it back to the farm level. What's the risk? What's the problem we're solving? Do we need to really sign up to any more of this stuff? Well, if we just did nothing for the next 10 years and just watched and waited and benchmarked to see whether we're missing out. Because, if you suddenly the Indonesians and the Vietnamese and the Chinese said, we're not going to take any more your grain because you're not you haven't engaged enough locally with Indigenous people, then fine, okay, we'll address it then.
I went to China 10 or so years ago with a group of growers, and we visited some flour mills and breweries especially, and maltsters, obviously making the malt for the breweries, and they love our product. They buy the minimum amount possible to blend with all the crap they buy somewhere else in the world because ours is more expensive, but they absolutely love it. So they're basically improving all the rubbish they can buy by buying Australian grain. So they already know that, and they were at the time CBH, cooperative grain handler in Western Australia, had a program called Better Farm IQ. A lot of farmers will remember that, which was a QA program. That was all the rage back then, QA. And it was quite controversial with growers. It was quite onerous, and there was issues around the cost of it and so on. We asked them, do you want us to have QA? Do you want us to have Better Farm IQ or QA? And they say yes, no. You really must have QA systems. And then I asked one of these guys, one of the managing directors, so will you pay us a premium if we're using QA? And he said, no. Well, we already know you're growing the best grain in the world. We're not going to pay you any more for it, but you should have it. And that is the truth of the market. So I think we can let our products speak for themselves. We're very open and transparent in Australia about how we do things. I've had Japanese and Chinese people who buy our grain, our markets, come onto my property and look at what we do. We get a bit of grain out of the silo and they're looking at the seed in the bin, they know what we do. There's no secrets about it and they absolutely love it. And a lot of this stuff, I can't help feel, especially now that GRDC has too much money sitting around, and we all know what happens when you have too much money sitting around. I'm worried that they're starting to stray into areas which is really just prefacing future regulation for the government, doing the work for the government with grower levy money. And I think if that is happening, something needs to be done about it.
It's an interesting structure. GRD set up 40-something years ago, along with the other RDCs, as John Kerrin, as the Federal Labor Party Minister at the time, said the state governments are winding down their research and development. And
that's very clear.
Now, but of course, as soon as they set it up, state governments completely walked away. Yeah. And I think there was 1,800 people in the Ag Department back in the early 90s. It was down to 950 10 years ago. It's now turned to DPIRD. It's a shadow of its former self. Every other state's done the same.
I'm pretty sure 50% of their staff are parked out in front of the coffee shops on Angelo Street in South Perth at the moment. That's just down the road from our place.
Well, if they're not working from home. So the states are out of it. The state government, Ag departments should probably just focus on biosecurity, trying to keep out the next round of nasties coming in. The problem is we turn over, there's $100 billion of farm gate primary production in Australia. $1 billion. That's 1% is going into these RDCs. Some of it's going to marketing, AWI, wool, MLA. That's all good stuff. No problem there. At least AWI gets a say every 3 years on voting on, but we don't in the grains industry.
And when we've attempted to even influence that process, which is legislated for us to be allowed to do, by the way, it's not a fixed levy, it can be changed. When we've, genuinely attempted to influence that, we've been stonewalled. So
it's an insane system where we can't get hold of the database to know now the 20, 25,000 grain growers, not a lot. We should be able to, GRDC should be providing a database and the funding so we can go out as the states who are part of the peak bodies and consult on this stuff. But GRDC say, oh, no, it's not in the legislation. We can't possibly comment, sitting on a lot of money. Well, and the minister goes, oh, there's two peak bodies under an insane system set up by Barnaby Joyce.
Yeah.
We're absolutely paralysed. The money keeps pouring in. They can't spend it fast enough. They're running out of things to spend. I wrote last week on what I called the sustainability traps in yesterday's Farm Weekly. GRDC is going to spend $60 million on helping farmers improve nitrogen efficiency, finding ways to extract more nitrogen, growing crops. And that's going to help, quote unquote, Australian farmers and farmers internationally. And I wrote a whole article going, why are we helping a Russian or an Argentinian or a Canadian be more efficient?
Grow better crops.
And compete against us. Also, we're helping Indonesia or Egyptian farmers grow more grain, good for them, but there's less grain they buy of us.
Yeah.
So a little cartoon with the Russian driving his header, dodging the Ukrainian drone coming in, and he's reading the GRDC nitrogen.
The fact sheet on.
It's like, and which is exactly what do you think they're not going to?
Yeah.
I guarantee every agro around the world supporting their grain farmers have somewhere, somehow, either directly or indirectly, read something that GRDC has produced that's helped them grow their farmers, look after their farmers. Now, if we're going to spend it, we should be really trying to quarantine the R&D. And then look,
yes and no. I look up research from Canada, and especially Canada on canola, with the changes to the rules on reg loan now, we're not going to be able to use reg loan to desiccate canola, so I was looking at what other products
and their farmers can fund it, brilliant. But, just how much of your money?
Yeah.
And look, there's always going to be spillage, no problem.
Yeah.
The quicker people pick up on it. But there's a swag of farmers who are not doing the basics. They're not tram tracking. They haven't got their lime and their acidity sorted. So, doing the latest, greatest research on something that they're years away from
blue
using.
Sky technology.
When they should be, they probably need to be maybe holding some money back to buy the new bundled, fuel tank that they're going to be forced to buy.
Yeah.
Or trying to, save enough money to be able to pay the tax on the mad, changes to the federal government's, discretionary trust stuff. These are real decisions that farmers should be having a frank discussion and a say on and a regular vote on, so that we allocate the scarce resources that come out of the dollars at the end of the year.
Well, they're scarce for us. They're not scarce for them. There's a bit of imbalance.
That's right.
Yep. So this isn't about criticising GRDC, because I think every listener to this program, and certainly every farmer listener, I think values, pretty much everyone values the R&D that we do, and it is one of the key parts of the success story for the Australian ag sector. So I don't think anybody wants to diminish GRDC, but every good thing has the risk of deteriorating, and I think when you've got all this money just sitting around and then looking for ways to spend it, that's a real vulnerability. And I think that, as you correctly say, I think a lot of growers can think of better ways to be spending, their millions of dollars tied up in reserves.
Look, we have we vote federally every 3 years. We vote state every 4 years. AWI with their wool poll. So what was it? 0, 1%, 1.5%, 2% or whatever, 2.5%. And for 6 lots every 3 years from the 2000s times of tough, they held it. When it got really tough, they dropped it by 0.5%.
Yeah.
So that tells me farmers, growers are supportive of the RDC, research, development, marketing, their dollars going towards it.
Yeah.
I suspect GRDC is, the grain growers are no different, but there's angst out there, and there is a failure of leadership from the federal minister, GRDC, peak bodies, farmers to the ground, saying 20,000 of us. Let's just have a say and let's make the case. And there's some really interesting models. I think the Canadians have a system where you can tick which your preferred area to prioritise.
Right, yep.
So you want more on this and less on that.
So you can do some good data gathering at the same time then.
You can look with mobile phones. I'm holding up now for those who are listening. We can have some great feedback, and it forces all of us to be much more engaged.
Well, it's been interesting as always, Trevor, and we could go on for hours, but I think everybody would fall asleep. But we'll save. There's a lot of things for future episodes there. thanks everybody for listening, and make sure you like the podcast because that helps get traction to some of these issues. So make sure
you've got a couple of good ones coming up as well. Who have you got in the pipeline?
Oh well,
either before or after me, depends.
I'd like to keep a few surprises up my sleeve, but yeah, no. One of the key things I'd like to do is I think a lot of our members don't really know how we work or how it works, how advocacy works. Right. And our non-members, I think a lot of people think if I do support an advocacy group, whichever one, what do they do with that money? How does it actually work? What's the mechanics? So I'm going to be talking to Mark Fowler, the president of ONWAFarmers Grains, John Hassel, the Vice President, National Farmers Federation, and Duncan Young, who's on the board of GPA, which is Grain Producers Australia. So some really, and everybody knows those names, there's some great thinkers, and they've got a lot of knowledge about the industry, which the average member, I think, probably isn't privy to a lot of that information, and I'm really looking forward to sort of digging into those issues and just mining those people for their knowledge and sharing it around.
Yeah, it'd be a good thing to actually sort of keep hunting down different key industry leaders and work your way through. There's a lot of different groups, GGL, we've got the Grow Group Alliance, there's drought hubs. If you put it up on a whiteboard, it's an interesting maze.
There's a lot of people with a lot of knowledge, and I'm looking forward to extracting some of it. So thanks everyone for your attention, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode. Thanks, Trevor.
Thanks, Mick.
Cheers.
It's on band.